It pleases me that so many of you have spent an idle afternoon or two contemplating Harold Bloom's concept of inevitability. Few pursuits have gratified me so abundantly. Professor Bloom was right, of course, when he said that a great poem was inevitable, both in word choice and in meter, while a good poem is merely predictable, satisfying perhaps, and oft-times clever, but were it left unwritten, the globe would continue to spin as ever. No, a great poem must exist, must find expression in the very words that seem to exist solely to capture this poem's heartbeat, and were even so much as a comma molested, the entire enterprise would immolate, bringing the world, nay, the universe, as we know it, to a fiery end. To wit, consider this line without Percy Bysshe Shelley's Ozymandias, and you will know exactly about that which Harold Bloom spoke. But what of the poet? Is he inevitable as well? A mere scrivener to those moments that demand poetic facsimile? Has he or she a choice? I leave that mystery to you in your midnight musings. Instead, I submit that there are moments in our lives that achieve a poetic resonance because, like Professor Bloom's poems, these moments are inevitable. They must happen. Whether we have the wherewithal to distill them into poetry or not is as mysterious as Shelley's shattered visage in the lone and level sands. I had a bad experience at Little Tijuana's on 26th Street one morning about 15 years ago. It was a Sunday, and a group of my bachelor friends and I had gathered for a repast of guacamole mexicano and flautas con queso. The conversation was desultory as befits the reminiscences of a weekend whose embers are still aglow, and the prospect of the imminent work week held all the promise of a damp espadrille. The confluence of these quotidian concerns caused us to tread in the water of our mutual reluctance for a bit longer than pleased the server, and when it was time to depart, I further inflamed her ire by asking my companions to wait for me while I visited the restroom. Perhaps it was the tomatillos or the chorizo de cerdo added a certain urgency to my step, but my intention was to be swift so that I might hurry our little cabal along and liberate our waitress from the hell that was our table. One does hate to disturb the help. My plan, however, was foiled. Let me explain. A guarantee of privacy is unforeseeable whenever one consents to public life, and it is never my intention to spawn an imbroglio by demanding the same sequestration I might enjoy in my own home. But there were no doors on the stalls in the men's room at Little Tijuana's, and I found this prohibitive. An impromptu calculation was made, and I resolved to drive home rather than lose my dignity to the vagaries of communal ablution. I hurried back to our table, gave our server an unenthusiastic 19% tip, and bid my friends a hasty goodbye. I remember the opalescent dusk as I headed home in my Ford Escort wagon. The metallic scent of the lakes lingered in the humidity, and the traffic lights on Portland Avenue cooperated, as if they were cognizant of the beads of sweat forming on it. I would be fine, I reasoned, cocksure that mind would indeed triumph over matter, and I allowed myself to entertain myriad thoughts as the escort navigated the fitful stream of fellow travelers. The detritus of the erstwhile bourgeoisie, I thought as I passed the tired grand homes on Portland, now broken into fourplexes and psychic storefronts. A murder of crows encircled the escort overhead, squawking as if to say nevermore in their avian tongues, while I, still quick with the breath of life, mused to myself that the toll of evening's bell will ring but a destined number of times before each of us must holy fucking shit I'm going to crap my bed. So violent was my epiphany that I nearly drove my car on the lawn and up into the living room of the unfortunate house that graced the southwest corner of 42nd Street in Portland. Had I massacred an entire family, you know, one of those groups of people who share a living space and perhaps watch the television together, I would have not felt responsible. My body had become its own agent, partitioned from myself and soul, and the nuances of ethical reasoning were no longer infused in its anatomy. Nature herself was in control. I continued east on 42nd Street, howling like a wounded wildebeest in an attempt to give voice to the firestorm that had ignited in my bowels. While my hands beat against the steering wheel in a rhythm so antediluvian I may have been summoning the ghost of the first person to crawl from the primordial sun. This diverting strategy worked, at least until the escort crossed Cedar, but as Hiawatha with its evil, unsynchronized life. I knew that my pitiable moans would not be enough to cork the cataclysm. I began to breathe as if I were a third trimester Lamaze student. Pray to a god I had long ago sacrificed on the altar of my liberal arts undergraduate education. I would do anything if he or she would grant me speedy passage to my own bathroom. My world, oh, that unappreciated sphere of diurnal charms, had constricted to the bubble of air between my panting face and the windshield. If I allowed myself to think about the clogged intersection and the mighty Mississippi that flowed between me and my deliverance, I live in St. Paul, naturally. My renegade body would have declared victory right on the spot, and I would have had to incinerate the escort in all its contents, along with my own disgraced person on the southern edge of South Minneapolis, where no one goes unless a trip to the airport is inescapable. Isn't memory a scam? I remember hurtling down Hiawatha and busting the light at 46th Street in a hell-bent stampede to reach the Ford Parkway Bridge, but I have no recollection of pulling into the floodlit alley behind the convenience store on Minnehaha, the one that abuts the railroad tracks just east of the Burger King. Nor can I revive the decision-making process that led me to position the escort directly under the streetlight, as if to pinpoint attention on the unholy act I was about to perform. I do know that I abandoned any hope of crossing the bridge and retaining my self-respect when I realized that the perfect, inevitable moment had arrived, and that the universe was inviting me to give myself over to a force much greater than myself. I cannot forget what happened next. Let me take you there. I bared my ass and shat in public. But it was more than this. I dare say that it was metaphysical, this singular experience. We all know that time does not stop. It marches on despite the demands of love and war and falcos por gay folk. But time and experience do not a single path tread, and while the winged chariot flew past me, I lingered in a moment of suspended consciousness, just long enough to take in the scene around me before blasting a ghastly crater in what would become my past. I must have put the escort in park. Perhaps I turned it off. Circumstances indicate that at least I pulled the parking brake. In a single, reflexive, choreographed moment, I opened the door, wriggled my dungarees into a bunch about my athletically socked ankles, anchored my hands and my feet within the frame of the escort's Cayman green chassis, and perched out over the pavement as a Polynesian buccaneer might situate his body off the hull of a catamaran. I felt a languid summer breeze against my buttocks, turned my face toward the first star to twinkle in the darkening sky, and then gave myself over to an ineluctable fulmination with an operatic outcry that drew attention to a performance that is otherwise best kept under wraps. You are thinking of W.H. Auden's Musée des Beaux-Arts, that in-jammed meditation of Bruegel's The Fall of Icarus. The connection is unavoidable, so I will not judge you for drifting toward the obvious. The daily life on the Dutch seaside with its ships and shepherds, interrupted by a boy, just legs and splash, really, falling into the water from the sun-dappled sky. The aliveness is near absolute. I think of the housewife doing her dishes at the kitchen sink, looking out into the gloaming and witnessing something amazing. A middle-aged man, nude from the waist down, clinging like a large hairy barnacle to the side of his cheap American car, spraying the wide-open alley with molten excreta, while his face contorts like one of William Blake's demons from Milton's Paradise Lost. Did she turn to her husband and say, "Honey, we won't be having dessert tonight"? Was she rendered speechless? Did she pivot from the spectacle, wondering, will I ever be able to erase this image from my mind, even if I live to be 1,000 years old? And what of the children tossing the baseball about before the darkness makes such pointless pursuits impossible? Were their memories altered irretrievably? Or a hobo along the railroad tracks, The teenager trapped in her polyester Burger King smock in the drive-thru window. The young lovers walking hand in hand into a convenience store to purchase some string cheese and a lotto ticket. How did these people absorb the sight of such uncongealed abasement? I cannot say. All I know is that relief is the greater part of happiness, while the decision to give license to my roiling entrails by shellacking the southeastern corner of the neighborhood with a fetid chum may have been indiscreet. I felt as if I were fulfilling a part written specifically for me by a perverted playwright whose respect for the audience is wanting. I did not apologize to these unwitting observers. I did not say anything. I cannot be sure they would have wished to speak to me given what I had just done. I hope they realized that the situation was beyond my control. Instead, I took a copy of the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, one I had fortuitously left on the passenger seat in case some shit happened, and fashioned an adult diaper out of the variety section. Then, with my pants once again pulled up about my waist, I spread out the rest of the day's news over the impressive deluge I had left in my wake and drove rapidly into the night. Praise God for print journalism. Time has passed since that poetic night, and it was poetic, at least according to the good Professor Bloom. What happened had to happen. My moment behind the mini-mart was inevitable, and as such, I submit that my ordeal was great. I certainly have not been able or willing to do it again. Besides, my tastes have changed. Of late, I've been drawn to a spicy Indian curry, a flavorful aloo gobi, a sweet and savory biryani. There's a delightful Indian restaurant in my neighborhood, and I dine there often. It is as spicy as little Kiwanis, although the tastes are different. And it's closer to home, much closer, in fact. Thank goodness.